Now I will show you some types of RL cartridges. I'll start with the 20-in-1 RL thickness, and then we'll move on to the larger cartridges. The basic movement is what's called powdering. As you can see, the needle creates a very delicate satin pixel. This is a thin needle, very flexible, and it works great for those very powdered, delicate effects. Next, I will perform a back and forth motion to show you how thin the line is. Look, the needle works very evenly. It doesn't spill or splatter the pigment. Next, I will show you a zigzag for the pendulum motion. The pigment deposition with this movement is always greater. And finally, what I like the most, which is a wider pixel. Now I will show you another thickness, one of my favorites. This is 0.35 RL. I will consistently show the same movements so you can have a comparison. The first push movement, you can see that this pixel, it's already a bit larger. The needle is a bit stiffer, unlike the 0.8. This is really a needle that you can work with in a very detailed way. As you can see on the skin, the line is also automatically thicker because the needle itself has a slightly different volume. Next is the pendulum movement. And a little zigzag. What does this mean and how does it relate to your work? By choosing a specific needle, you can plan the effect you want to achieve. You can see that with 0.18, the effect will be very satin, soft, and 0.18 already gives us a stronger pixel and greater pigment saturation. Now we will move on to slightly larger sizes. Initially, we worked with single needles. Now we will move on to multi-module needles. In this case, it will be 3 RL at 0.30. The push movement, as you can see, 3 RL is a needle that deposits pigment strongly. The line will definitely be much thicker than the single needle. It will work great for contouring work in mini tattoos. The pendulum movement will also deposit more pigment for you. A lot more pigment. I primarily use these needles for filling lips. Where the client wants a strong saturation effect, the so-called lipstick effect. Now we will focus on the 5 RL needle at 0.30. This is 5 needles with the thickness of a single needle, 30. We'll make the same movements, and you can compare how much this needle fills the surfaces. If I have very large areas to fill, it's not always lips, but also 3D effects. These are reconstructions. I use the 5 push movement. Look how intense the pixel is. And how much it fills in and delivers pigment. Next, the linear movement. Pendulum. And zigzag. Now we will focus on other cartridges. This is RS, which stands for round shader. These are needles dedicated to shading small, medium, and large areas. They work really well for transparent effects where the pigment gradation will be subtle and a bit more dispersed. And we start with the push movement. The spaces between the pixels are a bit more spread out, more elastic, and breathe a little more between each other. It's very important for you to know this, because if you want to achieve very powdery effects, RSK will be perfect for that. After washing off the skin, this line that I created will show you that there is space in this line. It won't be as deeply embedded as in the RL. And as you can see here on this pattern, this dot or pixel isn't as deeply embedded as in the case of the no RL. Now I'll show you a slightly larger cartridge. This is a 5RS with a single needle thickness of 0.30. As you can see, the movement itself deposits a lot of pigment, but it still remains elastic. Line with this needle will be very thick. Unlike the others that I showed, pendulum motion and zigzag. As you can see, the RSs leave a bit more blurry pattern on the skin. The same will be true for pigmentation. If you want a more spread out elastic and airy effect, choose RS cartridges. And finally, I will show you one more RS type needle. This will be a 7RS, also with a thickness of 0.30. The ejecting movement. You can clearly see in this example what kind of pattern is left in the skin. The line will be really thick. And finally, zigzag. Now I will show you how to work with the flat needle. You can work with it to create lines. Alternatively, you can create a gradient with it. Then we set the cartridge a bit differently. And ejecting movements, we work this way. This gradient is very delicate and subtle. Now we will focus on the last cartridge, which is the Magnum. As I mentioned earlier, this is a cartridge designed for fillings. You can work with it in two ways. One is ejecting. Look how much space this type of cartridge can pigment right away. Alternatively, with very slow movements, for those who are a bit more experienced, you can fill more uniformly without lifting the needle off the skin. These can be circular movements, but also pendulum movements. This is the cartridge that will fill in a given area the fastest and most completely.